Okay.
Welcome again to brandylibrary.tv. And cognac it is, not just any cognac, but the Maison Ferrand. Am I saying it right?
Absolutely.
This is Guillaume Lamy.
Hello Flavien, how are you?
Ferrand Cognac, Cognac Ferrand. It's not just cognac, it's also liqueurs, gins, rums, fantastic plantation rums.
Yes.
But today we're talking about cognac, so let's stay focused on cognac.
Yeah, you know, this is what we do. We are a cognac producer, and we do cognac the way it's been done for many, many years. So it's a small production. You know, it's not something that you can find on a very high scale.
And yet we can find you in many, many stores.
Well,
at least here in the US.
You know, that's because people really like what we do, but we don't ship a ton. You know, that's sometimes it could be a problem. You know, for us, we just have fun. You know, making the best cognac we can, basically. You know,
Very good. So if you have to sum it up, what makes the best cognac possible?
Well, to us, okay, it starts in the vineyard. It's very important to have the right grapes and to take care of the vineyard. You know, I heard somebody the other day saying, you know, that was just, you know, as a joke, but I was really shocked. He was saying that you make the best cognacs out of the worst wines.
I have goosebumps just hearing this.
You know, that's, you know, try to say to a chef that you can make the best dish out of the worst ingredients. Okay, so that's impossible. You need the best grapes.
Right.
You need the best wine to make the best cognac. So it starts with Grand Champagne grapes. That's what we believe. You know, Grand Champagne grapes, also known as the first growth grapes in the cognac region. You know, they usually have a better pH, better structure, you know, for acidity and fruit. That gives us basically more years in the barrel and more options to really distill our cognac and create complexity out of them.
So out of the 6 crus, you're using Grand Champagne. Are you also using some in Petit Champagne?
No.
What about Borderie?
No, we don't use Petit Champagne or Borderie because we just don't have any vineyards there. Okay. You know, Pierre Ferrand is only 100% Grand Champagne, which is fine, you know, because in Grand Champagne you can really find a lot of things to play with, and not everybody really knows that. I'm sure you do. You know, inside of the Grand Champagne, you actually have a part of the Grand Champagne known as the Campagnen, le Campagnen, you know, which is different from the Santonien. That's a pure chalk.
So we're talking about different soils.
Absolutely, and actually Champagne comes from Campagnen. You know, that's a geological era, 8 million years ago. You and I were not there, you know, but you know that gave that term Champagne, which means very chalky soil, and Grand Champagne, greatest concentration of chalk. And inside the Grand Champagne region, you have that small area that a few you know, people talked about, including the writer Nicolas Faith, called it the Golden Triangle, where you have 7 feet of pure chalk, the white gold in cognac, and we are very fortunate because we have our vineyard in the center of the Golden Triangle.
Would that be there by the Logis d'Anjac?
Absolutely. Right. That's about 160 acres, you know, so it's not big.
It's a small mine, I mean, but you're right there.
Absolutely. You know.
But I was told that the Grand Champagne would give cognacs that must be waited for.
Absolutely, yeah.
That are not going to be ready for the first few years.
But it's very tough to release a Grand Champagne that is younger, unless you have the right blending technique to really create richness and depth into the blend. Usually most Grand Champagnes, you have to wait a minimum of you know, 6 or 7 years, I would say, in a barrel to really, you know, get it done right.
If we compare that to Borderie and Framboise, when they are 3-4 years.
Well, Borderie, you know, usually has more maturity than the, you know, can have more maturity than the Framboise. Borderie is actually a very interesting, you know, we really regret we don't have any Borderie vineyards because we could do some beautiful things with it. But Borderie sometimes could go 10 to 15 years as a peak of maturity and really release some beautiful things. I know some Borderie cognacs are absolutely delicious, above 20 or 25 years. But still, you know, the average Borderie cognac rarely go above 15. But you have so many different aromatics that you'll find nowhere else. Framboise cognacs, again, in the Framboise area, you can also find some areas that could be very similar actually to Grand Champagne, believe it or not. You know, but there's still not Grand Champagne, so you cannot have the same kind of maturity. They are lighter, fruitier cognacs, very different from Grand Champagne, but cannot usually go as far. Grand Champagne, in average, are really the cognacs that go the oldest in cask. That's so far what we've noticed, and that's a fact in cognac.
So after 30, 40 years?
Yeah, 30, 40 years, that's really a peak of maturity. After that, very few cognacs make it. 30, 40 years is more like the human age of 85, 90 years, if you want to run a race somewhere.
Right. Then within your line, you started the Ambre.
Yes.
The Amber, that would be the youngest.
Yes.
And then through Reserve and Sélection des Anges. When you talk about 40, 50 years, you're more in the Abel?
Abel, absolutely.
That's what it is, right?
Yeah, the Abel would be more around 40, 45 years, absolutely.
So Pierre Ferrand Cognac is, I want to say, not the standard line of age statements, because it doesn't say VS or VSOP or XO, but we know that the Reserve is like your XO, great XO.
The way we look at it, Flavien, is that a VSOP is 4 years minimum and an XO is 6 years minimum.
So it's not enough for you.
So, why would we release an XO at 6 or 7 years old? It makes no sense. So we would rather release a very high-end VSOP, where we go above the aging requirement of VSOP, and even if it's above 6 years in the bottle, we still won't call it an XO, because to us it makes no sense. We firmly believe that to respect yourself, but that's the way to do it. An XO has to be minimum 12 to 15 years in a cask, to really show different ratio levels compared to a VSOP. So the Amber would be like a high-end VSOP if you want, and then we start everything else at the XO level, 12 to 15 years minimum.
Okay.
Everything else is there.
It's still a logic of blending, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm asking you this because I know that you always release small quantities of vintages. So how do you approach both ends of this business?
Well, the vintages we don't touch. We just never touch them for blend, so they are technically untouched and unblended. So these are sealed lots. That the whole process, right, of releasing a vintage in cognac.
It takes a few phone calls
it takes a few phone calls, a few government officials, and a lot of time and paperwork to enjoy a beautiful bottle of vintage. So that's why not everybody does it, because it's such a pain in the neck. But we love doing it, because it's a vintage is like a snapshot, of your life as a distillery. Some snapshots are not always the best, so you use them in a patchwork of different things. That's a blend. And some snapshots really are representative of who we want to be in an ideal world. And that's why we have some of them, and we just don't touch them. And
then in your
we release them.
What do you have in the cellars? Every year you're keeping some away, and you go back. Well, I know that
we have two humid cellars that usually that's where we keep our vintages, the ones that we don't touch. Humid cellars, this is where you simmer the cognac. This is where the cognac takes its time, aging. As opposed to the dry cellar, where you have more of a searing action on the cognac.
It's you see how culinary cognac is.
Cooking is very much like blending or distilling. It's all about patience. It's about size of the pots. It's about whatever you put in the pot to help the flavors go through, and it's definitely a lot of precision as well.
So when you're making your blends, you'll consider those young cognacs as maybe the salt and some older cognac as the pepper and all this. But what's the base? What's the core? For example, on the Reserve, what is most of it?
Yeah, I would say the Reserve would be around 18 or 20 years old. As far in a cask. 12, 15 minimum. We go rarely below 12 and rarely above 25 to keep it a nice balance and the style that we want in the Reserve. See, it's a tough question, and I'm sure a lot of the other cognac producers will tell you the same thing, because that's the truth. For us, it's always the same taste, but it's never the same age, because we work from wine. And when you work from wine, every year, you have a different distillate, which is very different than if you worked from sugarcane or barley. So it's very possible in cognac to have an 8-year-old cognac from a bad year that will be harsher than a 6-year-old cognac from a great year. So how do you always keep the same average age?
So you've got to keep tasting and...
Absolutely. We play with taste. We cannot play with math because the math of the average age doesn't exist for us. Otherwise, we will never have the same taste. It's impossible.
On a typical blending for the sélection des anges, for example, when you're ready to bottle, how many barrels would be put together?
On the sélection des anges, we would not touch more than 4 to 5 barrels.
Really, that's more.
Yes, because if you want to put it together, and then you have some bonifiers that you put in there, which is a little bit different. A bonificateur, because you always, when you do a blend, you always have a base of different cognacs that you use as the base, and then you have to finish the blend.
Right.
And I'm not getting too much into the the distillery secrets. But you have some bonificateur. So bonificateur, I call it bonifier. I just invented a new word, but I don't know how you call it here. But
bettering agents.
Or your tasting elements, maybe. That would be the technical term.
It's not as nice as that bonifier.
But again, let's talk about cooking. You know what a demi-glace is?
Yes.
Right. When you put a little bit of a demi-glace by itself, when you taste it, is really not good. I don't know if you noticed. It's not the best. It's so concentrated. Yeah. You don't really. It's too much. It's overwhelming. You put it in a sauce, and your sauce is fantastic. A bonifier is very much like a demi-glace. It's an old cognac that's way, way, way tired. That's now kept in a demijohn. We keep that in a paradis. Right. These are all our collection of bonifiers, so all very expensive ingredients or secret ingredients for our blends. And then we put a little bit of them in some blends, and then you accentuate the complexity, more viscosity. You bring so many new things to a blend that, again, you cannot talk about average age.
Right. After the distillate is produced, you put it in barrels. What is special about barrels? What is special about that curing in the barrels? Is there heavy toast? Is it medium toast? What kind of wood are we talking about? Would you reveal something here? Is it a wide variety of different wood?
Yes, but depending on the choice that we make right at the beginning, first of all, the distillation will bring some choices as far as the aging. If we have a product that we think will mature quickly, but will not deliver as much as a product that would mature slowly, okay, we basically use wider pores in a cask, in the wood. So we use Limousin oak, with a heavier char. But when I talk about a heavier char, it's still a very light char, Bourbon standards.
Right.
We don't charcoal anything in cognac. We will do a strong char and wider pores to accelerate the process of aging.
But we're still talking about toasting, really.
Absolutely, and get the best out of it, so that this cognac can express itself as soon as possible. Okay. On the other hand, the ones that we think can be absolutely fantastic in 20 or 25 years, we want to make sure they take their time. So we use Tronchet oak, which is a narrow pore. That's a different forest, more in the Burgundy area of France. And then we have something that creates definitely more maturity, more complexity, more richness. It takes more time, but also will make a different cognac altogether. And that's usually the cognacs that we have in those humid cellars.
But all brand new eau de vie are put straight in brand new barrels?
Yes.
Okay.
Always for 6 months. That's important.